Greetings, folks. It seems like forever since we've been together, doesn't it? I believe this latest break from producing episodes has been the longest one that I have taken since I started this program. There has been a ton of stuff that has happened since the last regular episode, and I'll be discussing it this week throughout the show. For a brief synopsis, though, here's the rundown. First, the 2 weeks Denise and I spent in Turkey and Greece were amazing. The return trip travel to the U.S., well, that's a whole different matter. There have been some more developments in the situation dealing with the Sevier County Republican Party, along with the Tennessee Republican Party, which is why I titled this show Leadership, Cowards, and Cheats. There was also a candidate forum last Thursday at the Sevierville Civic Center that was hosted by Empowered Sevier. I have shared that video from the event on my social media pages and the webpage. I encourage you all to go check it out. The video is a bit lengthy, but I believe it serves to provide answers that some voters may have on the positions I have on many issues. The forum also ties into this week's show title, Cowards and Cheats. A small complication happened, but a welcome complication in that it fixed a long-standing physical problem. The campaign also received a few huge endorsements the past few weeks, which I have shared on my social media pages. There is another public candidate forum coming up that I will let you all know about later in the episode. Additionally, I also held a meet and greet event last week that went pretty good despite the complication that I'll talk about. Several House District 12 voters have requested some campaign yard signs, and I will be delivering them this week, along with putting some out throughout the district while I am out doing my door knocking. If you are interested in volunteering, by the way, thank you to those of you that have already stepped up and are volunteering, but if you are interested in helping out the campaign, send me an email. The email address is larry-for-tn12@protonmail.com. Again, the email address is larry-for-tn12@protonmail.com. You can also reach out to me through the website. Again, the website is also libertyleadershipandlies.com. Well, that's it for the brief synopsis and update. So now it's time for the disclaimer. The following content is approved by Larry Linton for TN12, candidate for the GOP nomination for Tennessee House of Representatives, District 12. Larry Linton, Treasurer. Now let's get on with this week's episode of the Liberty Leadership and Lies podcast, where I will detail the actions of cowards and cheats in leadership positions. So let's take a stand in the arena together again this week, folks, and let's get on with the show. Welcome to the Liberty Leadership and Lies podcast. On this show, we will discuss the assaults on our liberty by the very institution we the people created to secure our liberty. We will also compare and contrast the actions of people in leadership positions to the servant leadership that is needed to protect our God-given, constitutionally protected rights. Additionally, we will break down the many lies that elected and unelected officials in government and media spin every day in order to secure for themselves positions of power and influence that are antithetical to the system of government our founding fathers created and passed down to us. Your host on this program is Larry Linton, a 30-year veteran of the United States Navy who also runs his own leadership consulting company. He is also a candidate for the Republican Party's nomination to represent Tennessee's House District 12, which includes Gatlinburg, Pigeon Forge, Pittman Center, Weirs Valley, Seymour, and parts of Sevierville, and most of Sevier County. So here is your host, Larry Linton. Greetings once again, folks, and thank you for joining me after such a long break between episodes. I must tell you all that the footsteps of Paul pilgrimage Denise and I went on was both amazing and left us wanting for more. Before I recap the pilgrimage, let's talk about the elephant in the room, so to speak. The sham trial and sham conviction of President Trump. Many people will look back at this event as a seminal one in the history of our country. The direction this country takes post-trial will be documented one of two ways. The first being the point in our republic's history where the death rattle of freedom began in earnest, or the point where a vast majority of Americans realized just what lengths the Democrats or the communists will go to stay in power. Personally, I'm praying for it to be the latter, but only time will tell. I and many others have asked the question the past few years, is it bad enough yet? Has it become bad enough to wake up every freedom loving citizen in this nation? Or will vast amounts of people stay asleep in the hopes the government will just leave them alone? Again, only time will tell. Not too much time because the November election is just a few months away from now. Of course, most of the responsibility for that travesty of justice is held by the commies and their mad lust for power and for the destruction of our constitutional republic. By all means, every American should hold them accountable in the voting booth. That message, though, only applies to people listening or watching this program that live in those blue poop hole cities and states in our republic. There is no chance that Donald Trump does not win an overwhelming victory here in Tennessee House District 12, as well as the entire volunteer state. That does not mean to not go vote, though. In fact, if you live here in Tennessee, you should make sure you bring as many people as you can to the polls on Election Day. For all of you people trying to tough it out and working hard at trying to be left alone in your blue poop hole states and cities, you need to do the same. Vote and bring everybody you know to the voting booth as well. Not much talked about, though, in this situation is the fact that some of the blame for this can also be attributed to establishment Republicans. Their weak positions and the continuous enabling of the commies to behave this way, that has led us to this point in our nation's history. Vote them all out of office. The establishment Republicans and the communists. Vote them out at every level of government. Going forward, though, once again, the commies and the Uniparty or the Transpublicans, they have put the citizens in the position of having to rely on the Supreme Court to straighten out this mess. We are once again forced to live by the courts, which of course means our republic will die by the courts, as I have said many times on this program. Now, even the communist justices on the Supreme Court should recognize the too many to list reversible errors this partisan trial judge in New York made, and either will order a retrial or completely overturn the verdict in the case. It will be another monumental waste of time and money, which the commies are perfectly comfortable with. Whatever way this ends, Donald Trump has already won. All right, so now let's get back to the pilgrimage Denise and I took last month. To be able to visit the locations where the Apostle Paul spoke while planning the first churches of Christianity was a once-in-a-lifetime experience. Our church group got to stand in the spot in ancient Corinth where Paul stood trial, and it brings his actions 2,000 years ago to life. Our many different tour guides were very knowledgeable about Paul's travels and trials, and they helped to make those events come alive, so to speak. We also visited Mars Hill and the Parthenon in Athens. Our group also visited several Greek islands, and chief among them was Patmos, where the Apostle John, the theologian, was sent into exile by the Roman Emperor Domitian during Rome's persecution of the early church. Denise and I, along with many other members of our church, we walked through the cave of the Apocalypse, where God revealed to the theologian the visions which he wrote down in the book of Revelation. We also toured the monastery on the island that is dedicated to John. There were other islands on the itinerary that had nothing to do with the Apostle Paul, but were places that we checked off our bucket list, like Santorini, Mykonos, and Crete. We also stopped at Kuşadası, Turkey. That's where we boarded a bus to take a tour of the ancient city of Ephesus. That, folks, was truly amazing. I would urge you all to read up on that ancient city and the part it played in the early church with such important figures like the Virgin Mary and the Apostles Paul and John. All in all, it was an amazing, and if you get a chance to visit those locations in the future, jump on it. Now, the trip home from Athens, it left a lot to be desired. By now, you should all be familiar with the troubles I routinely encounter while traveling. It used to be a running joke with my teammates and my last command on active duty, and those troubles have frequently followed me now during my travels for my consulting business. For starters, that day that we started to travel home, the bus picking us, our group from the hotel and driving us to the airport in Athens, it was a tad bit late. That caused a bit of anxiety with the group as we had a very tight travel schedule. However, we did arrive at the airport with enough time to get checked in and get to our boarding gate with plenty of time to spare. Once we boarded the plane, though, that is when the trouble started. Our tight flight schedule only had a 90-minute or so layover in Philadelphia, and during that, we had to clear customs and transfer our checked bags. We were also arriving in Terminal A, and the flight from Philadelphia to Knoxville was departing from Terminal F, the two terminals farthest away from each other in Philly. After we boarded the plane in Athens, we were delayed 2 hours from our scheduled departure time. 2-hour delay with a 90-minute layover where we had to clear customs. Sounds like a problem, doesn't it? So by the time we landed, and we were still waiting on the tarmac to even taxi to our gate, I opened up my American Airlines app and saw that our connecting flight was scheduled to start boarding. I selected the link that advised me to change our return flight home to one that was leaving at 6 a.m. the next morning with a connection in Charlotte. I thought we were all set when I received the notification that our originally scheduled flight from Philly had a delayed departure time of 7 p.m., which means if we hustled through customs and raced across the entire airport, we could make that original connecting flight. So while we were still taxiing to the gate, I called American Airlines and tried to get back on our original flight. The agent, who spoke broken English, when I didn't have time to wait for that one agent that could speak English more clearly, informed me that I could only get back on the original flight by checking in with an agent in person inside the airport. Well, Denise and I made our best effort. We cleared customs and got to the gate of our original flight with enough time to board. We spoke to an agent at the help desk 2 gates down, and they said we weren't scheduled for the next day's flight and should still be on the original flight. We then headed back to the gate and used our boarding passes to board. And that's when the gate agent said that we weren't on this flight. So now we had 2 conflicting messages from American Airlines. You can probably imagine how angry I am at this point, but I'll save that for the next segment. Maybe. Right now, I'm going to take a quick break before I pick the saga back up on the other side. Oh, and a quick programming note here, folks. You will notice that there are now only 2 full segments, plus the opening and closing segments of the show. That is because longer video segments are now allowed on some of the platforms this podcast is on. That is the way the show will be put together now going forward, unless I get feedback to go back to the previous format. Please let me know if you prefer 2 full segments of around 12 to 15 minutes each, or 3 full segments of roughly 10 minutes each. I'll do whatever the audience prefers, and with that, I'll be back in a bit. So stick with me after this short break. Okay, folks, picking up where I left off. There we were, Denise and I stranded at the gate for our original flight in a standby status. What that means is that our seats on the flight, they were given away in less than the 30 minutes that it took for somebody else that was on standby to get lucky because the flight was delayed by a couple hours. It turns out that after the boarding was complete, 1 seat was available for standby and that they offered it to one of us. Of course, right? We decided to not split up, and we headed back over to the customer service counter to see about the flight in the next morning. Turns out that somebody canceled our seats on that flight as well. Probably something to do with that broken English customer service rep I was speaking with on the phone while stranded on the tarmac. Now, after some back and forth, Denise and I ended up on a direct flight from Philly to Knoxville at 3 p.m. the next afternoon. So what that means is that we had to then check into the Marriott connected to the airport, where we settled in for the rest of the evening. Not an experience I would wish for anybody to go through, but we made it home with some wonderful memories. We must thank our wonderful daughter, Kaylee, for taking care of our puppy, and podcast executive producer, Harlow, for the 2 weeks we were gone. Harlow's right now, she's sitting at my feet while I'm recording this week's show. We also must thank our wonderful neighbors, Tony and Elaine. Tony took it upon himself to mow our lawn a couple of days before we got home as a surprise. Well, it wasn't a surprise because we saw it on our security cameras, but we really do appreciate it and them. Apparently, it rained an awful lot while we were gone, and the grass was almost knee-high. An unforgettable experience for both good and bad reasons. We are looking forward to our next vacation, which Denise is already planning and working on. Now, that takes care of the 2 weeks that we spent apart here, folks. Now, let's get into last week and what is going on with the campaign and some other events. First, let's talk about the cowards and cheats that make up the members of the Sevier County Republican Party Executive Committee. I won't rehash the event that led them to earning the titles of cowards and cheats, but I will discuss how they have ignored any requests to discuss the matter. They have not even offered up any defense of their actions, even a lame one. Much like the communists that do not engage in hypocrisy but operate from a position of hierarchy, the chairman of the Sevier County GOP, along with the executive committee, they are doing the same thing. They have never been held accountable in the past for their actions, which are often contrary to the interests of Republicans here in the county, but they only serve their personal and very selfish interests. The good old boy network's level of corruption in this county is well known, and hopefully you, the voters here in District 12, will send them a message in the August primary. Now, I have sent more than 15 requests to the chairman of the Sevier County Republican Party to have an in-person meeting to discuss the violation of the bylaws and how they can make it right. Complete silence on that end, and not even, like I said before, a weak defense being offered. As I said, they are completely comfortable in their corruption. Along with the District 8 Republican Party State Executive Committee members, who are also violating the bylaws through their inaction in this matter. I have to say there was a bit of a promise last week when a Mr. Scott Smith, who is the secretary of the statewide Tennessee Republican Party, responded to an email I sent him. He in turn forwarded that email to two members of the state executive committee, the chair of the bylaws committee and the chair of the political committee, and asked them to contact me. Guess what? I'm still waiting, but if previous interactions with the state and county Republican parties serve as a guide, I will be waiting a long time. We shall see, though, and of course I will let you all know if and when that happens. Also last week, I had the opportunity to participate in a candidate forum hosted by Empowered Sevier. Only one of the three candidates seeking a seat on the county commission to replace County Commissioner Chuck Godfrey, who passed away unexpectedly earlier this year, showed up. The August primary will serve as a special election to fill that seat. The two candidates seeking the GOP nomination to Tennessee Senate District 8, which includes most of Sevier County, they were also invited, and only the incumbent, Senator Frank Nicely, showed up. All three candidates for Tennessee House District 12, which is also most of Sevier County, we were invited and only two of us showed up. If you watched the video of that event that I shared on the website and my socials, you know which candidate declined to show up. Yep, that would be the establishment candidate, the one the county GOP violated the state party's bylaws by endorsing. He was too cowardly to show up, because he would have to take a public position in answering the many questions every candidate had to answer. Rumor has it that he even tried to cheat prior to the events. I will save the details of that for another day, though. In Navy parlance, that behavior just checks with chart, or confirms what we all know about communists and establishment Republicans. For the voters here in District 12, please keep that in mind when you head to the polls starting in July. Cowards and cheats will always betray their oaths for their own self-interest. I am thankful for the voters that did show up to the event and participated in the straw poll at the end of the evening. A straw poll where I walked away with 96% of the vote. A percentage that one of Fred's buddies on one of the social media sites I run took issue with and called the participants different types of names because they didn't support his friend. Now, the complication I referred to in the introduction of this week's episode happened in the first part of the forum. You see, it was a meet and greet event where I got to shake hands with the voters who showed up, as well as the volunteers who were running the event. I too hosted a meet and greet last Tuesday where I had the same thing happen. The complication was that I had carpal tunnel surgery that Tuesday morning, and my hand was part numb and part throbbing with pain, and all wrapped in surgical gauze and bandages and made shaking hands painful and difficult. But right now, you can see it's got just a band aid on it covering up the sutures. It'll come off sometime next week. But of course, this is my dominant right hand as well. Now, my hand is healing quickly, though, and I will have the same procedure on my left hand sometime in July. Now, for the voters here in District 12, there is another public forum coming up this Wednesday where you can have a chance to ask the candidates, at least the ones that show up, ask us questions about policy positions. Check my socials for details on how to reserve a seat. The event starts at 6 p.m. at the King Family Library and is hosted by Convention of States Action Leadership for Tennessee's 12th District. If you are free that evening, be sure and make the effort to attend this event. I would be remiss if I did not thank the voters that showed up to my meet and greet at the Sevier County Library last week as well. The people that showed up are enthusiastic about the change that is needed not only in Nashville, but here in Sevier County. These folks recognize that the Good Old Boy Network are only serving their selfish interests and not the residents. They know something is wrong and have volunteered to help me fix it. They will be doing some door knocking and phone calling from now up until the election on the 1st of August. It is incredible to see people step up and do more than just put a sign in the yard, but will actually donate their time and effort in doing the right thing. And they are doing it not just for themselves, but for all the residents here in House District 12. They have recognized that there is a very little difference between how the communists seek to rob us of our liberty and destroy this constitutional republic and the establishment's so-called Republicans. The two methods between these two groups may differ, but the end result will be the same. Now, following a short break, we will close out this week's show with wisdom from God's Word and my closing thoughts. So stay tuned. We'll be right back with the conclusion. As always, folks, we will close out the program this week. I want to thank you all for watching or listening. And now for a bit of wisdom from God's Word before my closing thoughts. This week's wisdom comes to us from the book of Deuteronomy, chapter 31, verse 6. Be strong and courageous. Do not fear or be in dread of them, for it is the Lord your God who goes with you. He will not leave you or forsake you. One of the things that is really carrying me through this extremely uphill battle is my faith. Not only my faith in God and Jesus Christ, but my faith in this nation that was formed on the foundation of biblical Christian principles. I am encouraged daily to stay in this fight while I read from God's Word. I'm also encouraged by the many people that I encounter while out and about in the community, as well as through interactions on social media and my website. The people that urge me on in this campaign and offer their time and effort to help me bring this much needed change to our form of government. And it really isn't change, but a restoration of what our government is supposed to be and supposed to do. Some of the people I've encountered find it shocking at first, but reassuring to them that they made the right choice when I tell them that I will not accept a salary if elected to this position. The salary that is paid to House representatives, it will be donated to faith-based charities here in House District 12. I will use the money that government spends to erode the people's liberty to assist the people most hurt by government intrusion in their lives. It is only fitting that it happens this way, don't you think? I am humbly asking that the voters here in House District 12 take a stand in the arena with me this primary election. If we work together, we can force Nashville to do the will of the people once again, instead of the will of the corporations and the will of the central government in Washington, D.C. Until next week, folks, reveille, it's time to wake up.